What exactly is toxic positivity, and what do we want to learn about it today? So, we're going to start with a more technical definition, and then I'm going to tell a bit of a story. So, the technical definition is this from Dr. Jamie Zuckerman. And Jamie says the following: toxic positivity is the assumption, either by oneself or others, that despite a person's emotional pain or difficult situation, they should only have a positive mindset. Kind of always and only have a positive mindset. So I find this definition really interesting, but a little bit technical. And so I've been trying to work through how can we talk about this in a slightly more simple way. It was one piece of the definition that really leapt out at me this morning, and that is by oneself or others. And so it's not just something we do to other people, it's something we do to ourselves as well. And that's where it gets really, really interesting. Because what starts to then transpire is a lot of self talk about negative emotions, around difficult situations, and emotional pain. And so what we have here is an example for me that happened this morning. So I didn't sleep very well last night. I've got quite a few things going on this week, but there's one particular thing that's just not coming together that's really bugging me, and it's not one of the Morpheus stuff. It's something else, and I realized this morning that I was actually really quite stressed about it. I was really feeling the impact, feeling the stress of it. And I realized immediately I was dismissive of it. And there were multiple reasons. One of them was that, I'm this guy who's helping others. I'm supposed to be sorted. Another one is this thing of, well, it would be embarrassing to share this with other people. So maybe even a bit of shame. And a whole lot of things came up for me. And I was actually sitting and I do like a morning meditation thing. And I kind of went, oh my goodness, I'm talking about toxic positivity today, and guess what? I'm avoiding, I'm practicing it on myself, and thereby avoiding feeling my own emotions. And it was kind of, oh man, there it is. There's an example. And so that made it very real for me today, and of course I was then able to put it into some words and share it with a couple of close friends, and of course things start to shift from there. So it's a very interesting thing that we do it to ourselves as well. So the next part of this, explaining exactly what it is actually it's a bit of an oxymoron. Because if you think about it, if it's positive, it can't be toxic, and if it's toxic, it can't be positivity. It can't be positive. So really, it's a bit of an oxymoron, a little bit like civil servant is an oxymoron, or military intelligence, or anyway, let's not go down that road. And so that I think in itself is quite interesting. But at the same time, I want to be really clear. This is not about saying we should be dismissive of positive people. There are so many people who shine, who bring sunshine into the world, and we want them around. And so this is not about that. It's really about when we are dismissive of other people's emotions. That's where the problem comes in. And in many ways, it results in a bit of a facade where we're putting on the sunshine face, and we're not actually getting out there and showing other people what's really going on. And a typical example of this is, the Instagram version of my life, or the Facebook version of my life, where everything is just perfect. And that's really not what we're looking for. We're looking for a bit of reality. And as Brene Brown says, when you put a lid on your negative emotions, you're actually putting a lid on your positive emotions as well. And so it's really important that we experience our full humanity. And that's really what we're looking for. So now let's keep moving along a little bit and go, so why is it harmful? What's actually the story about the problem of toxic positivity? Where is the harm? Where's the problem? And the problem is really in four areas. And so I'm gonna take you through those four areas in a pretty straightforward way. But you can see here, everybody talking, facing this one clown kind of person. And of course, my slides are misbehaving again. All right, so these four things I want to talk about are the following. The first one is shame. And so what happens is that when one of the impacts of toxic positivity, when we have a lot of that around, either from other people or to ourselves, is shame. Shame is that sort of sense that what I'm feeling, I'm not allowed to be feeling. In fact, I'm probably unacceptable. My emotions are unacceptable, therefore I'm probably unacceptable. And so we have the toxic positivity, a result of shame. Shame is a very, very big one. And it's kind of not just that I'm ashamed of my emotions, but I'm almost ashamed of who I am as a result. And there's a lot of research on shame. I'm not going to try and explain all of that in this session. The second one is guilt. And the guilt one is very, very interesting because this is that sort of sense that if I'm not always being positive, I'm doing something wrong. If I'm not always 100% sunshine and flowers, then I'm doing something wrong. And so that is the guilt one. So we've got the shame, we've got the guilt. The third one is avoidance. We actually dismiss and deny our human emotions. And this is a very interesting one because the more we kind of going into, like I did this morning, I must try and put on a sunshiny face to everybody instead of really finding out what's going on, where all these emotions are coming from. We're actually denying in some ways who we are as human beings. Because when we are dismissive and in denial about our emotions, we're actually in many ways being dismissive and denialist about who we are as human beings. And everybody as human beings does experience a variety of emotions, the full gambit of emotions. And then the final one, the final consequence that I've got here, just as a summary, is stagnation, where in fact our growth gets limited. So there's a big opportunity. There's an invitation even in every challenging emotion, every challenging situation, and if we avoid that facing those challenges, facing those emotions, facing those difficult things that are going on inside of us, we actually are limiting our growth, and so we can become stagnant in our development as human beings when that's what's going on. And so that leads us then to a poll. And this poll is, Cindy's going to put it into the chat so you can have a look there. You'll see it. And we're looking for numbers from you again. There are 4 options here. Which consequence of toxic positivity do you think causes the most damage? Is it number 1, the shame, number 2, the guilt, number 3, the avoidance, or number 4, the stagnation? Let's get a few opinions going here. Okay, thanks. Jonathan says the stagnation. The shame is a big one for a couple of you. Also stagnation from Eugenie. Thank you very much. Okay, the avoidance, big one. Thank you. The guilt. Okay, all right. The avoidance again. Then the shame coming up for a few people. Wow, thank you very much. Very, very interesting poll. Thank you for that. So I'm very aware of the time, so I'm going to keep moving. Thank you thank you, Roy, as well. All right, got lots of you. Yeah, that actually is another result, isn't it, Jonathan? We start to doubt ourselves, maybe because of the shame and the guilt and the avoidance and the stagnation. Interesting one. Thank you very much. All right, so let's move on to the next one, which is then who? Who does this affect? What are some of the signs that we are being impacted by by toxic positivity, either to ourselves or by other people? And so we've got a bunch of signs. By the way, we will be giving this out to you in a handout, so don't worry about taking notes on especially this piece, because I'm going to run through this list quite quickly. But the signs that we have, I think I've got 7 of them here. So we will be sending out a handout which covers this for you probably in the next few days. So the first sign that you're being affected by toxic positivity is brushing off problems rather than facing them. So we were kind of dismissive and we're brushing off problems rather than facing them. That's one of the signs. Feeling guilty about being sad, angry, or disappointed. And I think I experienced that this morning. which is so interesting because one of the emotions I had this morning was anger with a particular situation. And it was really interesting that I felt guilty about being angry. So that's a very interesting one. Here's another one: hiding behind feel good quotes. You know, that sort of thing. Oh, you just need to shift your attitude because your attitude determines your altitude. All of these wonderful feel good quotes. If we're hiding behind those, probably there's some toxic positivity going on. Um, and related very strongly, hiding or disguising how we really feel. So when we're constantly being, kind of suppressing how we really feel. Now, I want to just add in the word appropriate here because this doesn't mean we should be broadcasting everything we ever feel to the whole world. And I'm going to deal with that in a bit more detail, not only in a moment, but actually in next month's session where we will be talking about leveraging our emotions, and so want to be really clear that it's not about broadcasting all the negative stuff. It's really about being very honest with ourselves, and being honest, especially to the people who are close to us. Another sign that we might be impacted by toxic positivity is minimizing other people's feelings because they make us uncomfortable. So the moment we're doing this thing where we're kind of trying to manage or shut down what other people are feeling because we're uncomfortable, we're practicing toxic positivity. And this happens a ton where, we'd rather just not know, we'd rather avoid, we'd rather look the other way, we'd rather find a way of moving the conversation along because we're uncomfortable, which is not a great sign of listening. I mean, in fact, that's probably kind of the opposite of listening, because what people really want is to feel heard. They don't necessarily want to be validated, but they want to feel heard. And I think that's a really big one as well. And then two others here: shaming others when they don't have a positive attitude. So really kind of picking on people if they are not positive is another sign. And then the final one is, trying to be sort of stoic with a get over attitude towards painful emotions. This is another one that could be another sign that we are practicing or being impacted by toxic positivity. And this one is, I find particularly interesting, that kind of thing. Oh, just build a bridge and get over it, those kind of things, where in actual fact, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more detail coming up when I talk about the how, but in actual fact, there's incredible benefit of embracing our painful emotions. And I'm going to give you one example now because I don't think I'm going to come to it later on. And that is the ton of research that there is on joy. And it kind of shows a progression that pretty much everybody who experiences a lot of joy in their life, say that that's joy based on gratitude. Okay? But here's something really, really interesting. When you go and research mourning a loss, whether it's a personal loss, whether it's a human being, whether it's just something, maybe a defeat or whatever, proper mourning leads to gratitude. So in other words, the root is mourning to gratitude to joy. And when we avoid the mourning and we're dismissive, we're not going to get to the place of gratitude and joy. And I'm not being dismissive of people who are struggling with things even years later because it was such a tragic thing. I'm just saying that the root is, when we face something tragic, to embrace it and to properly mourn actually gets us to the place of gratitude, which then gets us to the place of joy. So that's just one example I wanted to quickly throw in there. So we are now going to get to the when. And the when is sort of, why now? Why do we want to do something about it now? Or when do we need to do something about it? And I think we can all think of tons of examples of why it's urgent at the moment. I mean, from things like, online bullying and, this sort of shiny version of ourselves on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and that kind of thing. All of these things which are kind of avoidant of the negativity. But I want to add in the pandemic, because it's really triggered our need to control and to avoid uncertainty. And one of the ways some people are doing that is we kind of feel like, well, if I'm just always optimistic and positive, then I don't have to accept a painful reality. I can actually pretend it doesn't exist. And this is not useful. This is actually something which is a further reason. And we've got so many people at the moment who are really, really struggling because they feel isolated. I think the work from home has been really painful for the more extroverted of us. And I think it's also been quite isolating for a lot of people. I'm even hearing lots of stories of more introverted people who have really suffered in feeling isolated. So the pandemic, I think, has played a role, and this sort of try and gloss over it with positivity is actually toxic. And I think that's what it. So talking about connection, talking about being connected or the opposite of being isolated, I want to just quickly tell you that I am. I've already done that one. Sorry, slide behind. That Michelle Clark and I are launching a global storytelling circle tomorrow evening. And so this is something that we're doing. Cindy is going to put into the chat, if she hasn't already, the link for registering. There it is. Sorry, thank you, Cindy, already. And so this is something that we're doing tomorrow evening. It's 6 p.m. South African time, 1 p.m. Chile time, because that's where she's based. She's in Chile, in South America, in Santiago. Basically, we're going to have a few people telling stories, the rest of us listening, and it's this whole idea of building connection through story. And so anybody who's interested, please register. It's just $10 for the session, whether you're telling a story or not. And during the registration, you can volunteer if you do want to tell a story, or you could just register to be part of the audience in the storytelling. So this is a new initiative that the two of us are launching. So I thought I'd throw it in there because it relates to this idea of our need for connection and the whole idea. And I mean, you can see the rules here. The story must be true. You must personally be an important character in the story you tell. You cannot read the story or use slides, and your story must be 8 minutes or less. So that's the rules that we're going to go by, and we're going to start that tomorrow evening, South African time, 6 p.m., or adjusted for the other parts of the world. So that is that. Let me rather now move on and get to the final piece of this presentation, which is the how. How can we deal with toxic positivity? By the way, don't you just love my designer and these pictures that she comes up with for these things? I just think it's amazing. The Zen with the mask. I think that's just absolutely brilliant. Anyway, that's not me. That's my designer, just to be clear. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how. How do we deal with toxic positivity? So there are a few things that we need to be looking at. And the first one, I kind of hinted at this one or mentioned this a little bit earlier on, is give yourself permission to feel your feelings. We're not saying let your feelings rule you, but feel them. They're there for a reason. Now, whether you're a creationist or an evolutionist, it doesn't matter. The point is, we have them for a reason. That's why they're part of who we are. And so we have these emotions, or the full range of them, for a reason. This is not something that we can just go, oh, well, I'm just going to avoid all the bad ones and only embrace the good ones. Life doesn't work like that. The human experience doesn't work like that. One of the descriptions I heard from a psychotherapist is that it's like putting a lid on a pot of boiling water. And you can lean down on that lid as much as you like. But when you're leaning down on that lid, you're not just putting the lid on the uncomfortable emotions, you're actually putting the lid on all of the emotions. And it's one pot. Emotions is actually one pot. And so if you want to experience joy in your life, you've got to be able to feel all of your feelings. And so we've got to give ourselves permission to feel our feelings. That's our number one thing that we want to do. Now, I've already mentioned next month's Morpheus Intelligence Update is all about leveraging emotions. And I'll put up a slide right at the end if there's time just about that, but we'll be posting out a lot of information for that one. So that'll be the last Tuesday of October. Then the next one is that you need to give yourself time and space to process before acting. So just as much as we think it's really important that you feel all of your emotions, this doesn't mean that you must just have an immediate link from what you feel to what you do, because that's not wisdom. Wisdom is, let me experience them, let me feel the emotion, let me hear the message. And this is what I'm going to talk about a lot in next month's session. Let me really feel and experience it. It is providing me with information, just like a warning light on a dashboard. You know, when the oil light comes on the dashboard, I mean, there's multiple things you could do. You could put a piece of tape over it so that you can't see it anymore. You could take a hammer and you could smash it so that it's not, the oil light isn't coming on anymore. You could go and put some oil in the engine. You could go and check whether the sensors work. And there's lots of different things we can do. But we don't just want to react to our emotions. We want to feel them, figure out what's going on, use that information, and only then, once we've processed, do we decide on a course of action. So this is not about just following our emotions and being a victim of our emotions. Then the third one is we need to find productive ways to give voice to our emotions. There's a lot of research that says when we can put an emotion into words, so whether that's by journaling, which by the way is one of the things I did do this morning, or talking, which is another thing I did. I spoke to a couple of friends about what I was feeling. But basically the research is saying that when we put words to what we feel, the power immediately starts diminishing. And so that sort of overwhelming feeling of an emotion starts to diminish when we can put words to it and start to describe it. And I want to add a little technique here, which wasn't in the research I found, but I found for me personally, it makes a big difference. And that is that when we allow ourselves to really feel the thing, we can even feel where it is in our bodies. And I've had some before where I felt it in my solar plexus. And I've just sat with that feeling for a while. And then it gets less and less and less. And then suddenly I'm going, I can hardly feel it anymore. Because basically, our emotions get stored in our bodies. And if we listen to them, it actually dissipates. It reduces. And so paying attention to our emotions, just being present with them, makes a massive difference, as does journaling or talking about them. And so that's why that one is so important. Now I'm going to finish with a quick little list here, and I think you're going to find, I hope you're going to find this amusing and not too accusational. And this is my fourth part of the how, which is learn some non-toxic alternatives to toxic statements. So this will be a good one that you could practice on others and yourself. And so, for example, then we're going to start with this one. What it can sometimes be a toxic statement to say to people, just stay positive, just be positive. A non-toxic alternative is, I'm listening. Tell me what's going on for you. A massive difference for the person and validates them as human beings. Because as I said, I think one of the most powerful things that we can do for another person is to make them feel heard. And so this one is a really significant one for me. A second one, telling people, oh man, it could be worse. You know, it could be worse. And of course, anything could be worse. You know, but how about instead, that sounds hard. How can I help? Much better alternative, okay? What about this one? One of my absolute pet hates. Everything happens for a reason. And it's not that I don't sometimes believe that, but telling people that is toxic. I know of somebody, a friend of mine, a school friend of mine, who lost his daughter about 2 or 3 years ago, and is still struggling with that. And the pet hate response that he gets from people is, everything happens for a reason. You know, everything happens for a reason. And it's dismissive. That's dismissive. It's toxic and it's dismissive. And a much better alternative would be, I'm here. No matter what, I'm here. You know, that's just bringing myself to be present with them, and that validates who they are. I'll give you 2 more examples. Failure isn't an option. Actually, sometimes failure is part of life. That's the alternate. Is that, and in fact, sometimes we learn more from our failures than our successes anyway. And so rather than this kind of failure isn't an option, you've got to stay positive, sometimes it's simply a matter of going, sometimes we learn more from failures and it's part of life. And I'm going to give you a final one, which is one of my other pet hates. Happiness is a choice. Just decide to be happy, you know. And what we really want to do instead is say, your feelings are valid. Your feelings are valid. And I think that makes people feel heard.